Morning, everybody. So good to see you. Welcome to Vinings Lake. If this is your first time here, let me iterate my welcome to you. I'm so glad you chose to be with us. If you're joining us online, for all of you on TikTok, Instagram, Live, YouTube, I'm so grateful you're here. We hear from you guys every week, and I'm just so thankful. We've been in this series called Unlearning Empire, discovering a new way to be human. And we have been on a little bit of a summer break. I missed you guys. You right? Good. We good. You survived July 4th? Okay, 250 years as a nation, I'm told. And I am just, I don't know about you, but when I'm away like that, I'm reminded of how amazing spaces like this are. And I'm just so grateful to be back. And so this is part 4, I believe, started this series, and we're working our way through it. It's called the Sermon on the Mount, is where we're at. So it's Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Parallel passage would be Luke chapter 6. He calls it the Sermon on the Plain. So that's the only other book in the Bible that kind of parallels, and they're not exactly the same. You can kind of read it and tell the difference between the two. But we're working our way through this, and this is part 4. And where we're at right now is the very beginning, okay? And at the very beginning, this is known as the Beatitudes. So it's like Beatitudes they get it from the Latin word beatus, which literally translates blessed, all right? So even if you're unfamiliar with church, you know how the Sermon on the Mount starts. And the Sermon on the Mount essentially are these collections of sayings that Matthew writes down that Jesus was known for, all right? So if you were to sum up the message of Jesus, you were asked, what was he about? Matthew 5, Matthew 6, Matthew 7. And then the question becomes, how did he start and how did he finish these sayings, Matthew? How did he organize them and order them, and why did he present them in that structure? And so we've already looked from the very beginning this amazing truth that Jesus doesn't begin with commandments. He doesn't start with the 10 commandments. He doesn't say, hey, I've got something to say, gather around, here's what I have to say. Thou shalt not kill, all right? That's important. He doesn't start there. Where does he start? With a good news announcement. Here's where he begins. He steps into a volatile world that is overwhelmed by Roman occupation. And what does he do? He offers a new vision for humanity. That's what the Sermon on the Mount is. It's not more teaching, it's beyond teaching. It's a reorientation. It's a deprogramming of the empire and a reprogramming of the way of Jesus. It is a deprogramming of culture as we've been conditioned in, and it is a reorientation or a reorganization or a reconstruction of what could actually be. Every beatitude has begun with the same word, blessed. Every beatitude begins that way because I think Jesus is trying to retrain our imagination. All right? There's a reason these writers write and they continually repeat themselves. In fact, if you've ever read the Old Testament, you know that's true. A lot of times you read the Old Testament, you're like, God, it's like the guy just keeps saying the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah, remember, they didn't have iPads and books back then. So how did you learn it? By repetition. You would hear it orally over and over and over again. And this is what I believe the writer is doing. He's trying to get a point across from the very beginning. He's retraining our imagination. And how does Jesus begin? What's the good news announcement? Well, here it is for all of you, just in case you need to duck out early. Here it is. Blessed are the outsiders, the overlooked, the forgotten, the weary, the grieving, the exhausted, the doubters, the deconstructing, the spiritually bankrupt, the rejected, the excluded, the marginalized, the burnt out, and the barely holding on. Jesus wants to make very clear, I'm starting with you, and what I want you to know is God is on your side. And that is good news for all of us. So if you're in this room and you fall under that category, Jesus begins with you. And his understanding of how the realm of God, or the kingdom of God, as he calls it, is organized. It's organized and it begins with you. And how does he word that? He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And here's the one we're going to look at today. Verse 6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Let's repeat this. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Now, that leads us to two questions. First, what does the writer mean when he uses that word righteousness? That's a big, giant word, isn't it? Now, if you're in here and you're an atheist or you're an agnostic and you did away with church a long time ago, but you heard about us and you're like, that doesn't really feel like a church, so you're here today, and immediately you hear a pastor get up and he starts using the word righteousness, you probably got all kinds of sensation going down your spine right now, right? If you're in here and you grew up in church like I did, evangelical, dad being a Southern Baptist pastor, there are trigger words. One of those trigger words for me, well, there's several of them. One is rapture. We'll get to that somewhere down the road, all right? My God. We talked about it last year, but man, that word is loaded for me. And then another word is this one, righteousness. Because as a kid growing up, I heard that word a lot, righteousness. Now, we're going to talk about it today because I'll tell you what word I didn't hear much growing up evangelical, and a word I heard a lot about growing up evangelical. The word I heard a lot about was righteousness. Now, that whittled into keeping my life pure, okay? So there was like a lot attached to that word righteousness. And a lot of it that was attached had to do with a personal morality, okay? Righteousness. One word I didn't hear, and if I did hear it, I never recall, so it must have been just barely hanging on the edges. But I'll tell you a word that I did not hear growing up evangelical in the Southern Baptist Church. I did not hear, I heard righteousness, but I rarely heard the word justice. Now that is fascinating to me. I rarely heard the word justice, but I heard a lot about righteousness. Now, you can already tell where we're going because in the Hebrew consciousness, those two words align with each other. They intersect with each other. In fact, in Hebrew consciousness, if you use righteousness, it meant justice. If you use justice, it meant righteousness. There was very little separation between the two. But in the world I grew up in, if you were to ask, what did righteousness mean? It meant being a good person. It meant following the rules. It meant not touching my girlfriend in inappropriate places. It meant keeping my life sexually pure. It meant making a promise to purity at age 13 where I stood up in front of my church with a note and told them I would not have sex until I was married, and they put a ring like on my finger or whatever, and then I was supposed to give that ring to my wife when I got married, right? Like that was my understanding of righteousness, because apparently, as I understood God growing up in the church, the one thing God was ultimately concerned about was teenage kids making sure they stay pure. Like God lived or died. His reputation was on the line based on what a teenage kid was doing in middle school in Tennessee. And I carried that weight seriously. I didn't want to break God's heart. My pastor told me, listen, you need to put a Bible, have you heard this, right, between you and your lady friend on a date. And this is how they taught me. They're like, that way, if you ever feel tempted, you have to walk across Luke and John. And you've heard this, right? You've heard that, right? Come on, tell me you've heard this. And I followed the rules. I did that. I had a New King James Bible, and it was really thick, and it had the little tabs on it. And I would set it between me and my lady friends. And turns out Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it kind of easy to go across. Like it just, you know what I mean? Apparently not very big guys, because it was there, and then you could just kind of slide them out of the way and just. No. All of that said, I grew up with this framework of what righteousness was. Now, Matthew loves this word righteousness, because the dominant question isn't How do we understand righteousness? The dominant question when you're reading an ancient text like this is, how would this first audience have understood righteousness? And that's where I want to go today. Because Matthew loves this word. It appears 7 times in the book of Matthew, righteousness. It only appears once in Mark, and only appears once in Luke. Now, when most of us hear it, we think of modern understandings of righteousness. We think of these evangelical Christian understandings of righteousness. We think of personal morality. We think of being a good person. We think of following the rules. We think of, maybe you're like me, doctrine, creeds, dogmas. I mean, so much of the evangelical world I was raised in was centered around making sure your theological furniture was ordered in a correct way. I mean, how many of us were raised to believe that Christianity was fundamentally about your doctrine and theology and making sure it was coherent or sound? You've heard that, right? So make sure it lines up with whatever the pastor, church, leadership says it actually is. And so everything became about theology. And I think many people in America right now have fundamentally misunderstood everything Jesus was about. And part of that reason is because this institution came in and they said, actually, skip Jesus for a minute. It isn't necessarily even about what he did. What it's really about are these 10 beliefs. And if you don't line up with these beliefs, I'm not sure you can even call yourself a Christian. But here's what's fascinating. There are lots of different 10 things depending on where you go in the Christian stream. If you don't believe me, look around. This is why there are roughly 30,000 plus Christian denominations in America. Because no one can agree on what those things are. When you go back and look at church history, just go back to church history, you'll realize there are splits and turns at every second because no one can agree on this. This is why at Vinings Lake, when we first started, I said, I want to put a table at the center because the one thing I don't want at the center is a list of things you have to believe to. I don't want the 10 Commandments in the center. I don't want the Bible in the center. I want a table where everyone is welcome and they can come just like they are. Because here's what I realized when I was looking at evangelicalism. It doesn't work. Because every church that centered a statement of beliefs, whatever they were, eventually it was a house of cards and it would just begin to fall. So I'm like, what if we set something else at the center? And part of that reason was because I just lost all interest in these heady, esoteric, theological arguments. And I went to seminary. This is what I went to school for. But I need you to know something. I would go to seminary. I would sit in those classes. And when they started talking about like atonement theories, I remember sitting in those classrooms and the joy exiting my body. Because I remember thinking, only a seminary could take something so beautiful as Jesus and somehow make him uninteresting. Only the American church could take this good news that we've been handed and somehow pin it down and try to dissect it in such a way that it just, and this is the best image I can give, sucks the life out of the whole gospel. And this is why I'm convinced so many people, by and large, have walked away from the church, is because it actually isn't even that complicated. People are like, oh, talk to us. Is there some deep theological reasons? Of course there's some theological reasons, yes. But by and large, I don't know how to tell people this. I don't even think it's that complicated. I think the reason the American church is collapsing is because it's just boring. I don't think there's much depth to it. I just think it's gotten boring because people show up, and here's what I know. They have real issues in their lives from real policies that have been passed, and they're showing up, and a pastor gets up, and they're just like, okay, let's talk about penal substitutionary atonement theory. And people are like, what the hell is that? I just lost my best friend because I didn't have health insurance and all this went down. And I want real world information. And you're up talking about theological nonsense that has absolutely nothing to do with my life right now. And what's interesting is I never saw Jesus walking around and him busting up into places and him being like, okay, friends, we need to talk about something. Now, seriously, I need to ask you something. How do you perceive this theological issue of me about to die? Not one time in the Beatitudes do you ever find Jesus saying, blessed are those who correctly understand doctrine. I have not seen it. I haven't seen it. I mention all that to you because we still deal with that. Now, hear me. I'm a theologian. I'm not saying theology is bad or that you don't do theology. Yeah, do your theology. I think that's really important. But I think we need to learn how to prioritize a little bit. A couple weeks ago, received an email. We get all kinds of emails, and especially since all of our new friends that are watching online, since that's gone wild in the best ways, our email box fills up all the time, and different people check them, and sometimes they're sent to me, and sometimes if it's something I need to see or somebody thinks it's something I need to see, they'll fly it in front of me. Well, one came through. One came through recently, and it's a Monday morning, which I don't normally check emails on Mondays because I don't want to start the week. You know what I mean? Like, I usually like Thursday or Friday, Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or whatever, whenever I'm kind of done with the work. But this is on a Monday, and I'm not sure who sent this one to me, but it flashed, and I think I know why they sent it to me because I just smiled because it's actually really good. But they sent it to me, and this was the email, so I want to show you this email to be on the screen. It's one of those slides. Oh, there it is, right in front of my face. Okay, here's the email. Do you guys believe, this is Dear Vinings Lake. That was the head of the email, so Dear Vinings Lake. Do you guys believe in Jesus Christ? Now just pause right there, question mark. Do you believe in Jesus? Now, when I read this, my first thought was, okay, first of all, I don't know who this person is, and I always try to place myself in their shoes because I believed a lot because I'm a recovering former evangelical, so I know where they're coming from. A lot of these people, like I was raised in a world where I don't really care about the people who died. What I care about is, do you line up with my beliefs as I interpret and understand the scriptures? That's how and so that first question, do you guys believe in Jesus Christ? Already problematic. But I do know as a kid, I would have asked that same question. But I would just pause there because do you believe in Jesus Christ? I don't believe Jesus is like Santa. So I don't think it's an issue as like, do you believe Santa's real or not real? Do you believe Jesus is real or not real? Do you believe in Jesus Christ? Loads of questions to that question. Well, first of all, which Jesus are we talking about? Second, what do you mean by do I believe in Jesus? Do I believe what about Jesus? Okay? Then it goes on. And do you believe that he is the headship of the church and that the church is his bride in which he will be returning for? So, and this isn't, if that person that sent this is watching, all love. Actually, it's part of me gets where you're coming from. Just, you need to know this. In my life right now, I don't give energies to that. I just don't. And it's not that it's unimportant. It's just unimportant to me right now in my season of life. So I get emails all the time like, can you straighten out something that you said on Sunday? You said this, and I need clarification today. I don't give energies to those conversations. I just don't. And it's not, sometimes obviously you create margin for anything. So sometimes I will if I think, yeah, that's actually, that we need to give clarity. Or I messed up, I said something, I should have said something clear. But something like this that rolls in on a Monday, that's not how I want to spend the day. Do you know what I mean? Like, but then there's this deep sense of empathy because it's almost like I could see my younger self writing that. And I know that I was there, and I'm like, well, what if I could be the person that could help them take one more step out of that, right? But I also just pause and say that's so much of where American Christianity is, not just evangelicalism. It's wanting to have conversations about this while ICE killed a 52-year-old man named Lorenzo this week. Another human dead by ICE, Houston, Texas. If you're not familiar, look it up. 52-year-old man on his way to work, killed. Oh, turns out ICE didn't have any video footage. Yeah. It's being investigated. There's a lot happening. I just want to put the feet to the fire because here's what you need to know. We sure raised hell as white Americans about the 2 white Americans that died by ICE. But this was a Mexican American and is just not getting the news the way it should. I want us, hear me, I just want us to be aware that you take whatever you want out of that, but I want us to just be aware that is how white supremacy works. You know what I'm saying? So it rarely shows up in the hoods that people wear. It shows up in silence because, oh, well, it wasn't Alex Preddy. And I'm not putting those two in competition. I'm just saying let's be aware of why it hasn't made as much national news as the other. And it's part of our job to draw attention to these moments. Okay? But while that's going on, these are the types of discussions. And then there's this disconnect. We wonder why people are walking away from the church. And so I just want to pause here and say this. Somewhere along the way, we became more interested in believing the right things about Jesus than following the way of Jesus. Why do debates about atonement theories generate more passion than the lives of black and brown men and women who have been killed on our streets by police? If our theology doesn't deepen our compassion for those who suffer, we should ask what is really accomplishing. Many Christians spend their lives defending doctrine, but they won't even breathe air to defend real people affected by real policies. To every critic of Vinings Lake, please hear me. I believe in free speech. If you choose to use your energy criticizing us, you have the right to do so. I would just challenge you, and I would say, what if when you died, the world didn't know you by what you were criticizing? What if when you died, the world got to know you by what you were actually creating? And what I want to say to you is, we see it. Not because it's this ego in us trying to defend ourselves. We do our best to die daily to that. But what I want to say to you is, we see how loud you're getting about substitutionary atonement theory, and we see how quiet you are about black and brown bodies dead on our streets by police officers and immigrants dead from policies that are happening in our country. And if that's the Christianity that you are selling, don't be surprised when no one wants to buy into it. All right? Jesus consistently measured faith not by the precision of people's theology, but by the fruit it produced. Love your neighbor, mercy, justice, compassion for those who suffer. We've become experts at confessing Jesus with our lips while ignoring him with our lives. We've built a Christianity where you can affirm every doctrine about Jesus and yet still support policies and practices that dehumanize people made in the image of God. And the kind of Christianity that empire prefers is the kind of Christianity that is all about a personal salvation and personal holiness and making sure you don't sin personally and some private individualized spirituality that does not interfere and ask deep questions like, why did a 52-year-old man get gunned down by ICE yet again this week? These are the questions we are to be asking. Empire prefers a Christianity that shows up on Sundays and never asks those questions. Just tell the people, hey, we're all going to die one day, and if you want assurance when you die, we got good news. Say this prayer after me. And this is why, hang with me, people are leaving the mega churches in Atlanta by the dozens. Because they're tired of showing up on Sundays and the pastor getting up and not saying a word about what's actually happening during the week. And I get the hard part of that. A lot of these mega church pastors, isn't a judgment here. You have to understand they're navigating a Titanic ship. And for them to make comments and remarks like it shifts things. And here's the thing, that's called cost. And there's a level of empathy. I get it. But I would challenge every one of those pastors by just saying this. There is a cost greater than losing members and money. That cost is losing your soul and your integrity. That cost is that people are showing up in your church, and when you refuse to speak about politics, they don't hear that. What they hear is, why do you refuse to not address my pain? And if we're not careful, we buy into this individualized, private Western gospel that we've been handed that has nothing to say to the world and offers them only life after death. When what people are really wondering is, hey, is there life before we die? Yeah. This is the question. Now, all that said, I want to share a quick story with you, and then we'll move into this connection between justice and righteousness. I was standing over here, left-hand side, like I do after the church service. And this gentleman came through the line, and his wife came through the line. And sometimes, I don't do this a lot, but he came through the line, and I actually noticed him before. So I try to do my best, whoever, and this is kind of weird, but you'll come through the line today. I do my best to stay present with the person in front of me, but I have to admit, there are moments where I'll glance to see how long the line is. And that is, just so you know, like my wife doesn't do that. She's an extrovert, okay? But like as an introvert, that's a part of my DNA. I'm like, how much more? Now, please don't take it personally, because if you're a guest here today, like, I'm not getting in that line today. No, get in the line. Get in the line. I really want to meet you. You bring a lot of joy to my life. Tony just said, everybody get in the line. No. But I do it, and it's so interesting to me, too, because some people will come back and they're like, oh, my God, you're the pastor. Like, you spoke this morning. I said, yeah. What are you doing out here? Which I always kind of scratch my head like, what do you mean? Like, oh, well, the church I attended, the pastor was speaking, just walked right off the stage. Like, he didn't associate with the people. I'm like, what? Well, first of all, I have loads of questions with that. Like, how would you know who the people are and what they're walking through and living through if you didn't associate with the people? Also, I'm not a movie star. I'm not Prince. You know what I mean? Like, what am I, celebrity? No, like I'm you. You're me. Like, I live in Mableton. We're here. Life sucks, then you die. We need each other. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I was sitting over here, and I love hearing the stories too. They're fantastic, and I do get a little nervous. It doesn't happen a lot, but every now and then somebody will come by and they came to tell me how awful we are, and that gets, I mean, we've been fortunate. We have people within this church that look out for us, just so you know. We take safety very seriously. We are very serious about our kids back here. There are people in this room who are here to protect us, which I love, because I want Vinings Lake to be a safe place for everybody. LGBTQ folks, I don't want you coming in here and thinking this isn't a safe place for you. And I mean that on all levels, spiritually, physically, all of it. You know what I mean? So just so we're clear, yeah, we've got people in here. They're protecting us. We're here, right? When I'm in that line, I always look for them because I know who they are. I'm like, how far are they away from me? But this gentleman came through, and I saw him. So I was talking to someone, but then I glanced over, and I saw him, and it's like a presence. He came through the line, and then he said his name. He held out his hand, and I won't give his name away today. He's actually here this morning, but he stuck out his hand, and I shook it. And then he proceeded to tell me how he arrived here. Because I usually ask, how did you find out about us? And he actually, he turned his phone around, and he said something like this. He's like, this is how I arrived here. And I was like, what is this? I took a picture of what he showed me on his phone. And here it is. He was on the social media app X, formerly Twitter. And apparently someone who was criticizing our theology decided to go public with it, and they really just went at us. And by us, I mean my sermon, but that includes you. You do know that, right? Because if it was you, I would help you too. So apparently this person said, and y'all know, I do my best not to read stuff like this because y'all know, but it is worth repeating. Roberto taught us a long time ago, what you feed grows. So don't give attention to your critics because you're only growing their platform. So I rarely do this. So I'm not going to tell you who wrote this, but it doesn't take long. It's flying right now. But apparently it came from an Easter sermon that I gave, where I made a statement that said, I do not believe Jesus died for your sin. That really rattled some people. By the way, just side note, it rattled people so much so, thank you, yeah. Just a side note, rattled people so much so, I'm right now going back and forth with my editor, because I told you book 2 is on the way. But I just outlined book 3 and 4, and one of those books is this. So all I'm saying is we got a taste, but it rattled people so much that I realized, oh my God, like that might be a book. Like we need to talk. We need to talk about that. When the world starts going, we can't have that, I'm like, ooh, maybe that's what we need right now. So I just first of all want to say thank you to all the critics because you helped write the outline for book 4. All right, so. But this person just wrote and said, this is their post, quote, I do not believe Christ died for our sins. So he's quoting me. I don't live in a sacrificial culture anymore. When people are like, I'm just moved by the idea that Jesus died for our sins, I'm not. I don't even understand the sacrificial system, unquote. And then underneath that it said, quote, in quotes, pastor of Vinings Lake Church is too honest. Okay, no, we're good. Just hang tight. This is what he showed me. He's coming through the line and he showed me that, and then he's like, I got another one. And so he scrolls down and he shows me more. Well, I just pause there and say, I will actually, from a heart of gratitude, thank you, Vinings Lake. I just want you to know this, and I mean this from the depths of my soul. Thank you for being a place where I can be honest as a pastor. Because a part of the reason I never wanted anything to do with the church is because it felt fake to me. I never stepped into a church where a pastor could be honest. And my heart breaks for pastors that stand up and they have to perform on Sundays. And they don't even believe it. And I know they don't believe it because I get the emails from them all the time. And I will not rat them out because they have confidence and safety in me. But I get their emails going, Pastor, it's Easter and I'm supposed to stand up and talk about resurrection and I don't even believe in it. Yeah. And you'd be surprised, actually, who the pastors are who've written me that says that. And I'm going, that's okay. Why don't you just be honest about where you're at with it? I think it might move your people. Then they're like, yeah, it will move them to vote me right out as pastor. Because I forget, that's how the structure was set up for a lot of pastors. Yeah. We've been very fortunate here. We've got great leadership that actually, they encourage me daily, hey, be honest. You're safe here. If you're wrestling with some idea, it's okay to talk about it. And so when I hear someone say you're just too honest, there's just a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude that I can be a part of a place where I can be honest. And I don't know that you can be too honest. I'm not even sure that's a thing. Well, he went on. Here's the next one. Apparently this person wrote, more here. And then they said that I said, quote, leaving Christianity might be the healthiest thing people can do, unquote. By the way, I stand by every single word. I still stand by every single word that I said. And we'll get into substitutionary atonement theory. We actually won't. We're actually not going to get into subject. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to be honest. But this statement I stand behind too. Leaving Christianity might be the healthiest thing people can do. Yeah, depending on what version of Christianity you were handed, it might be the healthiest thing you can do. Yeah. Now, all that said, he came through the line because I said, "How did you find out about us?" And he said that. And then he showed me one other, and he said, "Now read this." And then someone commented down below and said, this is a comment to the critic, "Though I know you meant it to be a criticism, thank you for posting this video. We have been looking for a post-evangelical fellowship within our driving distance." He said, and then he said, "So Arizona said, see you soon at Cody D's at Vinings Lake." And then I read it, and he looked at me, he's like, "That's me." And pretty sure we hugged. And we had a moment, and then I gave him my email address or my number or something, and he hit me up this week, and he said something to this nature. "Oh my God, I never knew a place like this existed." So he said, "I went back to the earliest podcasts, and I've been listening to every sermon. The earliest podcast you have listened to," which, by the way, that's a daunting task. This, that's like PhD level. You know what I'm talking about? Like, as far as time consuming. He said, "I've been listening to every," and we've just been going back and forth, and it just brought so much joy to me. I'm actually going to write about it this week on Substack because there's a lot to what this individual said. But also, just for the record, I'm smiling because that person is here today in this room right now, and I just want to say thank you to them. All right. You're like, why do you bring that up? Because I think it's a perfect example of what we're talking about. I also would just like to say, in some bizarre way, I don't even know what you would call that, a reverse endorsement. But I have learned this to be true, so shout out to all the critics. Our critics, this is an actual factual statement based on me being at Vinings Lake in the last 20 plus years. I know this to be a factual statement. You can create any kind of advertisement you want, grab a billboard, push out postcards, tell the whole neighborhood Vinings Lake exists. There is no greater marketing than critics. Hear me when I say that. Critics are our best marketers. One person's warning is another person's welcome sign. I know that to be true because some of the best friends in my life right now, I met them through someone warning me about them. Do you understand what I'm saying? So anytime I meet someone online or I hear someone say, "Stay away from that guy," every part of me leans in going, "Why?" And then when I read, I'm like, "Oh my God, that's my brother from another mother that I would be friends with." And this has happened to me on many occasions. And so you have yet again a world that claims to be Christian that is far more disturbed by atonement, and here's the word, theory, than actual bodies. And I just don't think that was the message of Jesus. And I would like to say something about that because this individualistic Christianity works remarkably well for people who benefit from the way the world already is. If sin is only personal, we rarely have to ask how our systems, economies, politics, or cultures participate in injustice. And that private understanding of what this word is, righteousness, is far too small for Matthew and Jesus. So, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. That might be our modern individualistic understanding of righteousness, but it was not the first century's understanding of righteousness, and it was not the understanding as Jesus knew righteousness. Because in Jewish thought, justice and righteousness were intertwined. Righteousness includes personal integrity truthfulness, faithfulness, justice, mercy, economic concern, reconciliation, and right relationships. So righteousness is right relationships with the poor, with the marginalized, with the outcast, right relationships with each other, right relationships with the divine, right relationships with the planet we've been given, right relationships with all. Righteousness, justiceness intertwine together. So it includes both personal, individual transformation. We're not pushing that out. It integrates that, but it's much larger. The problem with Christianity in America and evangelicalism is not that it believes in personal, individual salvation. I think that's wonderful. The problem is when you stop there. And salvation or righteousness is much larger. So it includes personal transformation, it integrates it, but it transcends it, and it blows the roof off of personal morality and steps into collective systemic conversations. And we know this not because Jesus stood up and said, "Blessed are those who have sound doctrine." We know this because Jesus stood up and said, "Blessed are the poor." We know this because Jesus spent much of his life moving through towns, disturbing and calling out the injustice while healing those who suffered underneath that injustice. So, Luke says, his version, "Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be filled." Now that's interesting. Luke doesn't say, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness." Have you noticed this difference between Luke and Matthew? Luke said, "Blessed are the poor." Matthew said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." Now, if you're not careful, it kind of sounds like Matthew's the evangelical. And Luke's like the progressive. You know what I mean? Luke's like, "Blessed are the poor," and Matthew's like, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." So it's kind of like Luke's like, "Let's talk about the poor," and Matthew's like, "Let's talk to the middle class." By the way, Richard Rohr and a few other scholars say actually Matthew was writing to a little bit of a different audience than Luke, and Matthew was speaking to what would equate to more of a middle class audience. Now, I've had these conversations. We had someone recently, I wrote a whole Substack about it, how someone said when Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," they were talking about the humble, not the actual poor. Okay? And I paused there because that's so much of the world I was raised in. The poor just slipped right out of the theology. Just there was no place for the poor. So it was all about the humble, but not the poor. And I just want you to know, I don't think Matthew was trying to soften or spiritualize the beatitude. I actually think, and here's my theory, that Matthew is expanding it. He's blowing it up. I think Matthew's actually showing us how it's all intertwined. What do I mean by that? Here's what I think Matthew's getting at. Matthew's not replacing physical hunger with spiritual hunger. He's enlarging it. Why? Because you cannot hunger for God's righteousness without caring about people who are literally hungry. What is he saying? Luke is saying, "Blessed are those who long for bread." Matthew is saying, "Blessed are those who long for bread, and blessed are those who work for a world where everyone has bread." What many are feeling in America is this very beatitude. Yes, there are many in America right now who it is, "Blessed are those who hunger." But we can also pull in Matthew's line because I think a good bulk of Americans, this feels right. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. What is he getting at? This hunger and thirst is both literal and emotional. So it is both those who are hungering and thirsting in the first century, but it is also those who are experiencing deep within the bowels, and that's the framework given to us. from the heart, from the depths of your soul, those who are hungering and thirsting for justice. And that's many of you in this room. And you know that heartbreak. It is the ache of knowing what could be, yet having to live inside of what is. It is those that are grieving because they have seen glimpses of another world. A world where children are fed, strangers are welcome, and dignity is not reserved for the powerful. And once you have seen what the world could be, it becomes really painful to watch people choose the other. That's what hunger and thirst feels like. It's those this week who sat by their televisions and they ache. You can feel this, right? Ache at what they're seeing. I would dare say that's most people in this room right now. Most of you in here are part of the struggle that you have in your life right now is you don't know what to do with the ache. Because it's painful. You tell me if you're tracking. You long, you have this hunger and sensation and drive for justice and righteousness to be present. But you ache and grieve because you're looking at a world where it doesn't seem to be present in many cases. And so what this would look like right now is Jesus stepping up and him saying, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. You could say it like this: blessed is every American in this room who watched this 52-year-old construction worker get shot by ICE and wonder where justice is. Blessed are the parents and family of an 18-year-old left on an island in Mississippi July 4th named Nolan Wells. You look at a situation like that of a boy who walked into an island with a bunch of white friends and tell me how white friends walk out and never question where the boy is. And I see it. I just want you to know, I can't speak to it in certain ways as a white male, but I do want to acknowledge something. I see it. I do see it. We're at least at that point. I see it. I understand on a theoretical level why black people don't feel safe around white people. I understand that. I see it. And I just want you to know there are some of us right now, we're in this room collectively, and those things don't just happen in America. That's one reason I love social media. It's a love-hate, right? Because you don't want to see it at some sense, but also, God, I love the fact that we are a neighborhood as a country now. Do you know what I mean? You know, if you live in your neighborhood, something happens down the street, you're like, you heard about what happened down the street, right? There was a time where no one knew what happened down the street. But now we live in a world where we're all interconnected in all of these ways. And it's not even just America, but it certainly is that. But worldwide now, we get to see what happened in the cul-de-sac down there. And here we are in this moment, and we're looking, and I see the story of Nolan Wells pop out, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, I mean, the heartache, the grief. I watched his parents speak. Where is anyone, and is anyone going to do something about this? Because it seems very suspicious. We're deleting, we're taking his phone, we're deleting stuff in his phone, we're shutting down all social media, and we're lawyering up. That looks very, something, we want, and here's the cry, justice. Someone do something, right? Yes, that's what Jesus, I believe that's what he means in this moment. It is looking out 2 weeks ago and seeing a 28-year-old man hanging from a tree at a music festival in Michigan, Gerard Jackson. Very little media. And then the media that's on it says, it was a suicide. So a black man hanging from a tree is a suicide? I just want to pause right there and just say, there is a reason it doesn't get the megaphone. And through all of this living in America right now, I don't know about you, but every day, if I could put a finger on it, if I could name it, it would be this. There is both a hunger and thirst and drive that we're working for a world where justice is present. And I long for it. I long for that day, don't you? I long for the day where the world is, as I dream for it to be, where equity and equality and justice is actually present in ways that we don't have to long and crave for it anymore. This is what I believe Jesus is getting at in the heart of this beatitude. I looked like you looked during the 4th of July. I cut on the news periodically and I thought, well, look at that. We have a group called the Patriot Front, white nationalists covered in white masks, marching through the Capitol, through D.C., July 4th. No one seemed to care. What world do we live in where no one seems to care anymore? Where is the justice? Where is the righteousness? I got on the line 2 weeks ago with Don Lemon. You know, he's a friend now. And you can tell him I said it. He told me in the last conversation, he's like, yeah, some people will show up at your church and be like, hey, I'm at your boy's place. And we got a mutual friend who's obviously here, and God, love him too. But I was online, and sometimes I get on with him now. We've gotten kind of built this thing where I don't even know what we're getting on about. Sometimes he'll give me a heads up, but sometimes he won't. He's like, you got time to get on? I'm like, what time is it? 12:30. I'm like, let's go. And so I'll get on, and then he'll just start rolling out, like, whatever is the hot topic. And which is a bit out of my lane because I don't really like cultural wars and stuff like that. So sometimes I won't comment, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, it's coming. But he enjoys it. I feel like he enjoys it, and I'm starting to kind of like it. Because, like, what do you think about this? No one doesn't like if someone said, what's your thoughts on this? Well, I mean, I can give you my thoughts. But he showed a clip recently. I didn't even see it. But he showed a clip of Megyn Kelly. And I don't know anything about her. I've never followed her work. I've seen photos of her before. But he showed a clip of her, and she said just some racist slur to Haitians to go back to where they could go the F back to where they came from. And then she's like, oh, I'm sorry. And then he stopped the clip, and he's like, thoughts? And I'm like, Jesus, done. So I just paused, and I didn't really say much. I was like, honestly, I don't know. I don't really have anything to say to that, other than, first of all, let's talk about what she's doing. She knows exactly what she's doing. That's called clicks and ratings. Does anyone else get nauseous at that? When I watch the news, I talked to Don about it. I was like, what if we had an independent news organization that just wasn't about clicks? And that's hard, because clicks bring up revenue and commercial and da-da-da-da. Yeah, but can some of you kind of see the difference when someone's really concerned about something or when they're just doing it just to kind of like just get the clicks up? And I said, well, start there. I was like, that's actually pretty gross. I said, but on top of all of that, isn't it interesting, because he went on to talk about how a lot of people right now are really coming at progressives because they're like, you think everybody's a racist. And they say, I'm so tired of being called racist. And I just stopped. This isn't a new saying with me. This isn't a new saying with me, but I just kind of paused, and I told Don, I said, it's just one thing to note, and we should note this, and this isn't original with me, but it is a point worth making. Isn't it interesting? It's kind of like the evangelical world I grew up in. They were far more concerned about atonement theories than they were about black and brown bodies on the side of the street. But isn't it interesting now you have a group of Republicans, a group of conservatives that are far more upset about being called racist than their actual racism. Do you know what I'm saying? That's problematic. Anytime I meet someone who's like, I'm just all upset, somebody called me a racist. Well, what if you got more upset at the fact that we enslaved Africans and brought them over here? What if we just started there? That is a great starting point. And what if we all acknowledged as white people, starting with me, that we have been conditioned in a world that has a hierarchy and we sit at the top of that? Because here's the thing. It's just Kevin today, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm not worried about the rest of you. I know where you are. All Kevin's trying to do is help the people watching online, okay? Because the people online get really upset when I say things and like, why aren't people saying something? All right? It's fine. Here's what I always say to people watching online that watch our clips, and they're like, it's just so quiet in there. I worry about you, Pastor. Don't worry about me. We're in good hands here. Here's what I'll say about you. These people aren't exerting their energies on Sundays. I ask them, reserve your energies. Don't shout. Don't scream if you don't want to. Reserve your energies, because here's the thing. We live in America right now, and you're going to need every bit of that energy to make it to next Sunday, all right? So, wait, you just contradicted everything I said by... But I mention all of that to you because I said to Don, and there was something happening in the middle of that interview with Don. It shifted from interview to he and I just started hanging, and almost like we were both kind of ministering, and I don't use that word a lot, but almost like a healing conversation between the two of us. And we just paused, and I started sounding, I heard echoes of my own father. My father in the best ways. But we paused, and I said, Don, it wasn't that long ago that if Megyn Kelly had made that statement, she would have been canceled completely. It's like, Don, you know something about getting fired for saying something. Isn't that interesting? You lost that job, but have you noticed how far our culture's come? And he said something like, where do you think that came from? Well, I think it came from many things, but one thing is, I think it got emboldened when Trump came to power. This is why I don't want to live in a country where white nationalists feel safe marching through the Capitol. I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to be a part of a church where a white nationalist could walk in and feel safe. Now, whoa. Hang with me. Yeah, we need to have, and here's where it's headed, probably another book or another series. But we're going to need to have, as progressives, a conversation about what we mean when we say full inclusion. Because I am not here to protect the powerful. And there is a conversation to be had when we say everyone is welcome. What do we mean by that? And what happens when someone comes in the room and they make the most marginalized feel unsafe? Yeah. But I told him, it's wild to me how emboldened people have become in our culture. And I began to hear echoes of my father, because I'm like, man, back in the day, if you had said something like that, you would have been terminated immediately. But now, not only do you not get terminated, you go viral. And not only do you go viral, here's what blows my mind even more. I'm not even bothered by that. What I think really disturbs me the most is you don't go viral, you get praise from evangelical Christians who say, finally, someone's saying it like it is. What world have we evolved into? And as I said to him, Megyn Kelly is not saying it like it is. Megyn Kelly is saying it like she is, racist. Amen. You understand that? We didn't have church for a while, so I'm getting it all out, okay? Y'all all laughing, but I'm going to tell you right now, Kevin's going to have the biggest mansion in heaven that you have ever seen in your life. I am declaring it. I'm believing it. God, no, don't even wait till heaven. Give it to him now. Give it to him now. Kevin's going to roll up in a Rolls Royce next Sunday. And I'm going to be like, I'm not surprised. Okay. All of that mentioned, and we're done here. I watched what you watched. White nationalists walking through, Gerard Jackson hanging from a tree, Nolan Wells, body found, Lorenzo killed by ICE. That's just the last week and a half or so. And I, like you, I see it, and And I just want you to know, I think that's one of the things that makes our community so beautiful is we come together and Joe and this group leads us and we sing, but I hear in those songs a lot of our own collective grief. And I want you to know I see it. That's how I, by and large, see social media. I think it's a lamenting platform. All of us right now, here's what we're doing. We're hungering and thirsting for righteousness and justice. And this is, I want you to know, Jesus is speaking to you. To those who are watching vulnerable people get targeted, families separated, truth distorted, wealth concentrated. We have a trillionaire now. In America, we have a trillionaire now. By the way, I'll pause here because millionaires are often like, the beauty of capitalism. You're going to start to see millionaires get upset because millionaires won't mean anything when we move from trillionaires and even beyond trillionaires. Because you can concentrate your wealth to a degree, but when that concentration of wealth begins to pull from the bulk of society, then all of a sudden, just like when Alex Preddy was killed, you're going to have a lot of wealthy white millionaires going, capitalism ain't right. When did that start, right? And again, there's conversations to have. I don't think it's capitalism per se. There's lots of conversation to have. Right now, you see this spreading like wildfire. I mean, Trump has taken this card of communism and he's running with it. I actually think it's the first time he's probably ever heard about it. And he saw how it worked. And he's like, it worked before, we can try it again. I don't know that he even knows what the word means. I'll be honest, I don't know that any of us really know what we mean when we say the word communism. I don't know that we know distinctions. That's why it's critical for us in this moment to have people step up and bring nuance and clarity to these ideas. What is the difference between a communist and a democratic socialist? How do those things differ? And isn't it interesting how people lump it all together? And then there's this fear. And also, can we talk about how loud the students are back there? We're done. This sermon's done. I'm full on in the middle. My God, I'll call Garrett afterwards. We got to have a talk. I'm full on. I'm like, Garrett, bro, I'm in the middle of separating democratic socialism and communism, and all I hear is your room going, bah! Okay, I'll just close with this. I'll close with this. To those who are watching vulnerable people get targeted, families separated, truth distorted, wealth concentrated, and power rewarded while compassion is mocked. Jesus is talking to you this morning. To those tired of watching cruelty and corruption win. To those who keep wondering if we are moving backwards as a country. Jesus looks at you and says, blessed are those who have not become comfortable with children going hungry, with immigrants living in fear, with workers being exploited, with black and brown bodies being killed, with entire communities being discarded. Blessed are those whose deepest longing is for the world to be made right. That's it. If there were an English translation of blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, it would be that for me. Blessed are those who long for, whose deepest longing is for the world to be made right. Blessed are those who still ache for a better world. Blessed are those who refuse to normalize what should never be normal. So for every one of you walking out of this room this morning, and at some deep level, you're trying to enjoy your life, but there's also an ache. I just want you to know Jesus starts his sermon with the poor, and 4 lines in, he looks at you and he says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And here's the truth, they will be filled. Jesus starts with you and he says, don't lose that ache. Because when you lose the ache, you have become the very thing empire loves most. Keep thirsting. Keep hungering. Don't satisfy that hunger. Keep that hunger and thirst for the world to be the way it could be. Keep all of us as a church, as a community, as people watching online, may we all continue to wake up every day and hunger and thirst for righteousness and justice until it actually comes. And as Jesus says, and here's where we'll close, may your kingdom come. May your will be done, righteousness, justice, on this earth as it is in heaven. That's our hope.